H.P. Lovecraft. He was a prolific writer in the early 1900s whose work you're no doubt familiar with. It has been adapted into many pieces of media and fiction, as well as being referenced in and influencing many others, one of which was Bloodborne. Bloodborne is the fourth game from From Software in the Souls series, and it's very good, and it clearly takes a lot of influence from Lovecraft. There's a lot of ideas clearly taken from his stories that are twisted to make sense in the context of what goes on in Bloodborne. One of my favourite examples is how Bloodborne takes the story of Shadow over Innsmouth, one of the most well-known Lovecraft tales, and basically just does that for the fishing hamlet, whilst giving its own take on things. It deals with eldritch beings and horrors beyond your comprehension, typical Lovecraftian story beats, but never feels like it's just ripping off or stealing from his work. In fact, more paying tribute. There comes a certain point whilst playing Bloodborne where it becomes more than just influence, to the point Bloodborne becomes its own unique thing. If Bloodborne is more than influence from Lovecraft, then Lies of P is more than influence from Bloodborne and the rest of the Souls series. Lies of P is a game that takes a lot of heavy influence from Software's games, to the point I thought I was playing one at times. However, the game has many new, fresh ideas that are unique to it, that separate it from that influence, as well as it being surprisingly faithful to its main source material. It being a Pinocchio game isn't just an excuse for us to fight puppets in 19th century France, it actually has a story to tell, something to say about our humanity, and the idea of even transcending it. It also has an awe-inspiring world filled with some of the most breathtaking set pieces I've experienced in a video game, with a tremendous amount of interesting enemies to go along with it, some really intense boss fights too that had me on the edge of my seat throughout my playthrough. In this video, I want to look at it, dig into what makes it so extraordinary, and how it goes beyond the influence it's clearly taking from, as well as looking into why influence itself is so special, and why things are caused by it. This is a critique of Lies of P, and I hope by the end we can see more than just influence. I think there's two important ways where influence can be used correctly. It can come from wanting to pay tribute to something in some way when it comes to a person's work, and I also think things can take influence because it just works in the context of whatever the thing is a person's creating, specifically talking about movies and games here. It's creating something that's like another thing and being moulded into something different to fit into a person's movie or game, whether that's because they like the thing and want to honour it, or because it just works. Not all influence is good or necessarily needed, but when done right, it can create something truly special. A great example of this is the film Unbreakable. It's very clearly influenced by comic books, but it's not actually being adapted from any itself. It's more of a family drama that's using the comic book formula to tell something completely different. A lot of the shots are through doors and hallways to give it the appearance of a comic panel, and even the main character's name, David Dunn, is a clear reference to a lot of comic book characters because they have alliterative names. E.G. Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Lex Luthor, and because Deadpool is popular right now, Wade Wilson. That's my excuse to get his name in the video and hopefully be picked up by the algorithm. Unbreakable is doing everything in its power to make itself look like a comic book, and this all works because of the context in its story. It's twisting the influence of the comic book genre to create a truly inspiring movie. If you can learn anything from this video, it's that you need to watch Unbreakable. This is the more interesting use of influence to me, when it's there for a reason, where it's working out for the product, as well as paying tribute to whatever its main source of inspiration is. Alan Wake with Twin Peaks, that's a very big one. Monty Zander made an extremely well put together critique on it that I highly recommend you watch. I'll link it in the description. His videos have actually influenced this critique, so there's that. A lot of stories like to take influence from Moby Dick. My dad mentioned this with Jaws, and yeah, that makes sense. I don't know how I never picked up on that one before. But also, Metal Gear Solid 5 is very much influenced by the Dick. And whilst we're on the topic of Metal Gear, Snake Eater is influenced by James Bond, especially with its main title theme, and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is influenced by a lot of cocaine. The previously mentioned Bloodborne with Lovecraft. And yes, Lies of P. Lies of P is clearly taking a lot from the Souls series. Games like Neo, Hollow Knight, Jedi Fallen Order, Survivor, and many others have taken ideas from the Soulsborne games and implemented them into their own, becoming a Souls-like as the phrase goes. A more recent example of a Souls-like comes from Another Crab's Treasure. This game is using the Souls formula, but in a very unique way, in one of the most unique ways I've seen, and it's actually a lot of fun. These are all games that are clearly influenced from the genre, and even trying to be it, but in my opinion never coming close to giving you that feeling a Souls game does. Some are good, hell, some are even great, but they're not Souls games, they are Souls-like in design. Lies of P has the DNA of a Souls game. To me, for all intents and purposes, it is one. I mentioned at the start how I even felt like I was playing a From Software game at times. It's paying tribute in the most honest way it can. This is a true Souls-like. I want to ask a question here though. Would Lies of P work if it wasn't a Souls-like? The short answer is no, it would most definitely not work. The game was crafted to be this way, it was consciously designed to be like this by a development team. It isn't just taking ideas and putting them into something different, it's using a gameplay formula players are familiar with, and giving you a new experience with said formula. I wouldn't call it stealing because it's a completely new thing. I didn't think I was just playing Bloodborne or any other Souls game in my playthrough, and that is not what the developers were going for. Lead producer Ji-Won Chow had this to say to NME after the trailer was released. Though we're greatly honoured that many players felt the Bloodborne vibe for our trailer release, it definitely wasn't intentional. Still, Bloodborne and other Souls-like titles are certainly inspirational, and almost everyone on our team is a hardcore Souls-like fan. We would say Lies of P is most Souls-like in the aspects of death penalty and difficulty level. Our primary goal was to find a story known to everyone, if not the vast majority of the player base. We also wanted a story that is not a typical dark fantasy, not set in the Middle Ages, has adventure as the core theme, and comes with charming characters. Pinocchio fit the bill, and it was easy to conceptualize it as a Souls-like. Lies of P is paying tribute to the Souls series and even improving it in some cases whilst honouring its core influence, not once trying to rip it off. So for the rest of this video we're going to compare and contrast. We're going to look at Lies of P and the Soulsborne series and look at what Lies of P does better, what it does worse, and why it had to be a Souls-like in the first place. So let's start where the player does, in the heart of the city of Krat. Every single one of the Souls games starts with the player character waking up, oftentimes being born again, being resurrected or summoned into something new. There's a sense of disorientation when you first start one, a feeling of urgency as you try to figure out your place in the world. You get an identical feeling whilst playing Lies of P. We don't know who we are or what's gone on in Krat, but we want to find out, we want to get off that train and investigate, and we soon learn that it all went to hell. We make our way through bloody bodies wondering what happened, what went wrong, and of course this being influenced from Souls games, the answer is not that simple. Krat Station is a great tutorial for the player. It tells you all the key mechanics, and it even has a tricky enemy for players to fight before they continue. All the Souls games do this, they set up intrigue and build off of it. Lies of P makes us want to explore the world, to see what it has in store for us, whilst teaching us the basics. I would say the game's world is actually its strongest asset. Making our way through the city, towards the hotel, we see posters advertising Homo Machina, the best butlers and maids at your service. So naturally, those are the enemies we fight in this part of the city. There's dog puppets as well. I imagine the rich would have these because they make a good pet. After all, you probably wouldn't have to do much with them when they can just walk themselves and don't need to be cleaned up after. Every single enemy fits in the context of the location it's placed in. The same can be said about the boss of this area too, the Parade Master, a hulking puppet that was used in the carnival. He works unquestionably well as the game's first main challenge, and his moveset represents the type of puppet he is. This is what Lies of P does best. It has a world that feels connected, that makes sense, and it uses a diverse amount of puppets and enemies to get this across to the player, whilst making you want to check out all it has to offer. Whilst the game is a lot more linear than any of From Software's games, you still get that feeling of adventure and advancement travelling from one location to another. My favourite example of this is being able to see the hotel from basically any place you visit. It's always off in the distance, no matter where you are, even at the very end, just showing how far you've come. And it helps that the hotel is interconnected to most locations. It makes the significance of it more known this way. It's a true hub world like Firelink Shrine or Majula. A warm feeling of safety comes across you whenever you visit, with a beautiful song in the background that never gets tiring, and if you somehow don't like that, then you can pick from records you find throughout the world to play instead. You feel secure here, and it works as a great setting for our adventure. It's just cozy, a lot like the hub worlds it's inspired from. It even tells you when you need to speak to certain NPCs to progress their story, and this is a feature I much appreciate and hope FromSoft implements into their games going forward. I'm gonna hold off talking about the characters and upgrades we can find here just for now though, and continue talking about the world. Don't worry, everything will get a time to shine. The game's formula when it comes to its world is straightforward. It's pretty much level based, taking you to a new location in each chapter, with each enemy and boss being a good representation for that level. Chapter 2 takes us to the city rooftops, so a lot of the enemies here are the butlers again, and even some cleaners to go along with them. They even use their cleaning equipment to attack us with. It's all very thought out. A problem I have with some Souls games, not all, is that some of the enemies in locations just feel placed there for the sake of. The best areas are the ones where everything synergizes to truly immerse you in the world. I'm talking about locations like Blighttown with its grotesque inhabitants, Lothric Castle and its many knights and soldiers. Bloodborne probably does this the most consistent, with every location and enemy making sense, even the weird ones. Chapter 2 also introduces you to the human enemies. These serve as mini-bosses, and Mad Donkey is a fantastic introduction to this type of enemy. It is also in this chapter where we meet the Scrapped Watchman, a challenging boss who, despite his size, is surprisingly quick and agile. His attacks are rapid, and you have to either try and dodge or parry him. His design is also stellar. He was the top policeman puppet, and his look represents that. It should be noted that for the boss fights I use the optional summon the game provides for you. I have no grudge against anyone who uses things like this in FromSoft games and other Souls-likes, and neither should you. I'm not the best at these games, and if it's giving me an option to make it easier on myself, I will happily take it. Mimic Tear is a great addition to Elden Ring, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. That being said, I do enjoy a challenge, and sometimes I don't use the summons. That's mainly when I'm forced into a situation where I can't. Scrap Watchman just ticks a lot of the boxes to what I look for in a Souls-like boss fight, so you know what, let's create a ranking system for all the bosses going forward, not counting mini ones. Here's what I'm looking for: a tough but fair challenge that keeps the player engaged, a rewarding feeling after beating them, even with the summon. Do they make sense in the location we find them in? And do they look cool? Parade Master is going in B tier and Scrap Watchman A. Let's continue. Chapter 3 is really when I started to realize that this game is its very own thing. I will admit the first 2 chapters are very reminiscent of the streets of Yharnam. It's hard to differentiate the two on a visual level sometimes, and my biggest complaint I have about Lies of P's early game is there are too many shortcuts taking away that feeling of accomplishment after making your way through a grueling area. However, that is not the case moving forward. Vanini Works is one of the most praiseworthy areas in the game for its aesthetic alone. It's where the puppets come from, so a lot of the enemies we fight are the skeletons of them, as well as the ones who do all the heavy lifting around the factory. We get to see that process of how they're constructed, how the whole place occupies. I'm pretty sure this big ball of fire is meant to be scrap puppets, and it's like a trash system. But it could just be there as a hazard for the player because you do see this later on. I like how industrial this level is. It differentiates it from the Soul series fully here. Some areas in the game are similar to the ones you'd find in Soulsborne, but the best ones are the new ones. The steampunk ones, the train cart ones, the goddamn Resident Evil 4 island ones, places that give you a new experience like the devs set out to do in the first place. Vanini Works is screaming at you to explore it and see how it all works, and the one running the show is one bastard of a boss fight. More like Kingsflame fucko. This was my first proper roadblock. Even with the summon, he would still kick my ass. This and one other boss I'm dying to get to were truly intense. But the thing about the King's Flame though, I don't think that tension was earned. They have a lot of moves that are very hard to dodge, that the parry window on is extremely small, one where he can kill you instantly if you don't have the right materials. It's not exactly a fair fight so early on in the game. I didn't feel rewarded after killing him. I felt a wave of relief, although he does make sense for where he's placed in the game. A giant furnace boss in the factory is a cool concept, and his design is interesting visually, so I'm gonna be fair and put him in C. Maybe I just had a bad experience with them, who knows. Moving forward, we head towards my favourite chapter in the entire game. Oh fuck. Moving forward, we head towards my favourite chapter in the entire game, If Chapter 3 made me start to realise this game was something different, Chapter 4 sold me completely. This is my favourite chapter, and there's a lot of reasons why that is. It made me capture a feeling I had when I saw Anolando for the first time. This area is very much that moment for this game, where you grasp how grand this adventure you're going on is. It's a very ambitious feeling. You have this lovely build-up as well as we make our way to the cathedral. We take a tram upwards, and it's purposely slow so we can take in the view whilst ascending the cliffside. And once we get to the top, we're greeted with a new enemy type. See, this game isn't just about puppets, it's about monsters as well. I love that there are hints to this early on, that there's something more going on in Krat. It does a Bloodborne in the best way it can. That game starts off with monsters and beasts, but then as you dig deeper, you find aliens. Its core theme is the more you know, the scarier things become, and the things become more complicated to understand. Lies of P's main theme is, well, all about lies, and these monsters that we meet will tie into that when I eventually get round to talking about the story. The monsters for now are just scary, and have extremely frantic attacks that if you're not careful, will kill you. They're a nice change up from what we're used to, and they come at a good time too. We have just gotten used to how the puppets attack, so throwing a new enemy type at us that's completely different really sweeps the rug out from under you, as we now have to adapt to this enemy. It's not unfair though, we just have to deal with them a little differently, and like the puppets, they have their own set of weaknesses. A lot of the puppet enemies have to be parried to deal with them efficiently, and their main weakness is electricity. The monsters are a different ballgame. It's better to strike first and hard before they have a chance to attack, and their main weakness is fire. Every enemy has its own strengths and weaknesses, and it's up to us to exploit them. Once we make it to the top of the cliffside fighting off some monsters, we open a door, and this is where the grandiosity of the cathedral is made clear to the player. This is a really important area, not only to the people of Krat, but to the larger story going on. Without any words spoken, we can understand this on arrival, and travelling just a bit onwards, we can see more is going on, and that we're not alone here. With only a brief tease of this area's boss, we descend deeper into the church and discover some nasty things awaiting us. I love how layered this whole area is. We have to first go down to then go back up as we scale the tower, fighting enemies and platforming our way through the cogs, to then fight a mini-boss and after go deeper than we've ever gone before as we take a lift to the bottom, and as we go through the level, the more chaotic things become. The cleanliness of the cathedral is on full display at the entrance, but as we go further and further from that, the real horrors become clear, and the one responsible for this is one ugly Mother Hubber. Fallen Archbishop Andreas isn't necessarily a challenging fight, but he is a fun one. He's the first two-phase boss, so you know the game gets real at this point. His first phase is pretty simple, just dodge and attack, but he has an armoured shell around him, so the best place to attack is his head. His second phase is when things become more interesting, with a really cool cutscene to set it off. There's two ways he can attack now, using the bishop's body or the beast we had in phase 1. This really spices things up and makes you strategize about which side you want to go for. I mean, I technically went for both sides because of the summon, but I think that made the fight more unique because we had to both deal with a side each. You get the idea from the cathedral and looking at him that this guy used to be very prideful, but something happened that caused him to turn into this disgusting monster frog hybrid, and this visual storytelling is always nice to see when it comes to the bosses. Andreas isn't the hardest boss, but for his design and cool gimmick, I'm gonna place him in B. After beating Andreas, we get a cutscene and the reveal of our big bad and a hint to his master plan as we see some sort of machine harvesting the Ergo from the fallen bosses we've encountered previously. I'll talk more about Ergo in time. It's chapter 5 next, but there's someone important in the cathedral we should meet before continuing. This is Alidoro the Hound, and I don't think it's an accident that he's purposely set up in a similar fashion to how we first meet Solaire in Dark Souls. Like Solaire, he is an interesting character with a lot more going on, and he's the guy we go to when we want to trade boss's Ergo for weapons. This mechanic is intrinsic to the Souls games, being able to sell boss souls for weapons, and the same thing happens here. And the boss weapons in Lies of P are some of my favourites. In fact, the weapons in this game are all pretty cool, with a lot of versatility to them, with what build you can use them with. Actually, let's talk about that. Weapons and builds in the Souls games have always been a mixed bag. Sometimes you can make really strong builds and break the game entirely, and others you just invest in strength and swing a sword. The problem I have with a lot of Souls games is all the weapons feel very similar. A great sword is a great sword. No matter how cool it looks, unless it has some sort of special move, it will swing exactly the same as all the others. Bloodborne does not have this problem, with it sacrificing the quantity of weapons to make each one unique. Lies of P also does this, and has plenty of variety to what you can use those weapons with. Lies of P also has a feature where you can mix and match weapon blades and handles to make something that suits you. I myself never really used this mechanic though, as I found the boss weapons to be more interesting and fun to use, so I gravitated towards them more. As we go through the woods, you'll see that I'm using one of my favourite weapons, Ouroboros Eye, a sort of chainsaw that lets me hack and slash through baddies in a really satisfying manner. It also has some really cool special moves with its Fable arts. Every weapon has these, and some are even exclusive to certain weapons. Most of the Fable arts are just parries or a strong attack, but my favourite ones are the ones that change up the playstyle, like this throw attack that's really rewarding if you manage to pull it off without getting hit. It also has a temporary ability to charge the blade, making it deal more damage as it spins faster. A complaint I do have about the Fable arts though is not all of them are that fun or interesting to use. Still, this mechanic is an extremely interesting one, and one I hope they add to in the sequel. Weapons also upgrade exactly the same as they do in Soulsborne, where we find certain materials and invest a certain amount to make the weapon stronger. This is a thing most games use when it comes to their upgrade systems, and I don't really have a problem with it. Traversing through the woods, we'll end up at the Black Rabbit Brotherhood hideout, a challenging but fun place to fight through, and we even get the brief help of these two strangers, who I'm sure won't betray us later on. I can't, however, say the Black Rabbit Brotherhood are exactly an enjoyable bunch to fight. In fact, they are the worst boss in the game. They aren't even tough, it's just this game's attempt at a gank fight, and I don't think it does a very good job with it. The main focus is the big brother, and he's the only one you actually have to kill to finish the fight. The other rabbits are just annoying and get in the way. They do have smart designs, though the boss arena is whatever. Even if it is their home turf, I feel something more interesting could have been done here. So these guys are going at the very bottom in F. As we investigate the Brotherhood's base, we find a portrait of someone that is the spitting image of our character. That's weird. We also find the golden tree, and the golden tree fruit that goes with it. This is a super important item, not only in the world, but to us also, as it allows us to pay for special abilities that we can use with our companion cube that this nice stranger gave to us. The wish stones are an awesome addition and can really change how fights play out, and they reinforce the idea that using the summon for boss fights isn't that bad, as a lot of the wish stones are specifically for the summon, like healing them or giving them different attributes to its weapon. Thank you, kind man, for your kindness. It's time for us to face the Puppet King now, the one responsible for all this mess. Sorry, the one we think is responsible for all this mess. Before we do that, let's get some upgrades. An item you'll most definitely come across is quartz. This is a sort of rare upgrade material that can be used to give us some really helpful, well, upgrades. If you invest a certain amount of quartz into a slot, you'll unlock that slot's ability, such as being able to carry more weapons or more amulet slots. Amulets are the substitute for rings in this game and basically give the same benefits as they do in Souls. Good stuff. Every time you invest in quartz, you can also choose an ability that just makes you stronger, like more pulse cells or healing item, more ergo upon eliminating an enemy. There's a lot that just help you out and makes you feel stronger the more you progress. This is a fantastic upgrade system that allows you to find a style that works for you. The game does have the typical Souls-like leveling structure, but with this on top of it, it just makes it more interesting and more experimental. Also, if you are wondering why I may have more upgrade slots than you, it's because after beating the game, you get access to another set of upgrades. Then, after beating New Game Plus, you get access to even more. This incentivizes replayability as you can get stronger even after the game has been beaten. Alright, let's go kill the Puppet King. We head back to the streets now, but the more high end of them. All the fancy shops and apartments are here. Even a big clown man. You may also see I'm adding an electrical effect to my weapon. This is the grinder, a very helpful tool that allows you to apply certain benefits to your blade. It works the same as fire or bolt paper do in Bloodborne, but the grinder recharges when resting at a bonfire. So whilst you do only get a certain amount of times to use it before it temporarily runs out, you never have to worry about it permanently going, so a level of strategy is at work here for when the best time to apply it is. The game also takes another page from Bloodborne in how it's best to dress to impress. Clothing in Lies of P makes no difference strategically, and it's purely cosmetic. Instead, bolts and cogs that we don't see are used as armor pieces. This means we can look as drippy as we want without having to sacrifice anything in return, and those outfits can be quite drippy. We head to another beautiful location with some bastard enemies that can apply this game's version of Curse onto you, killing you instantly if you let it build up. I just love the spider-like appearance of the opera puppets. They are freaky, and they have to be taken out quickly if you don't want to get killed easily. Whilst visually this area is stunning, there isn't that much to do, and the hallways feel a bit repetitive. However, this is only a short segment, and the brief time we spend here is memorable. And the memorability is further brought on when we reach the area's boss. This cutscene beforehand makes us deal with the toughest boss we've faced so far. Foreshadowing. We're introduced to the King of Puppets, and he seems friendly at first, even trying to shake our hand, but we're having none of that and decline his formality, kicking off one of the best bosses in the game. He hits hard and is surprisingly fast, so it's best not to underestimate him when going in for quick strikes. He can swing his arms in a frenzy, dealing hella damage if he connects. And yeah, I just used the word hella. That's not all though, because he also has a phase 2 that's completely different. Stripping himself from the ginormous puppet body, we are left with Romeo, the King of Puppets. He fights a lot like Lady Maria does, as he is quick, hits hard, and the window to attack him is small. Look at how he massacred my summon. Both of his designs look incredible, and this boss location is fantastic. He's going in S tier. Even though we're told that defeating the King of Puppets is a big deal, we don't really feel much accomplishment, or what we did matters. We feel there's more going on, and this is proved by the fact that Geppetto is standing right outside. Suspicious. Geppetto tells us to kill the alchemists, and without a choice, we accept this mission. For a brief time, the game becomes a horror as we enter the Grand Exposition Plaza. The Grand Exposition Plaza. We have to deal with some disgusting looking creatures, and we get the feeling again that taking out the Puppet King probably didn't even help this world, if this is what the humans have become. A complaint I do have here though, and for the whole game, is Liza P likes to do the enemy hiding around the corner bit FromSoft does, but Liza P must do that bit about 50 times in the entire game. It gets really tiring having to check every corner, and at a certain point just becomes predictable. The plaza, whilst being relatively small, is compact and detailed. There's a lot to admire here, like the displays for puppets that you have to fight, or the disturbingness of the horrors that lie the more we explore, what the alchemist did to the people of Krat. I like this boxer type enemy that warms you up for the main fight of this area. Oh, and that fight is against the best boss in the entire game. Victor is just so special. He's one of the most unique Souls-like fights ever because he's completely different moves-wise, whilst never seeming unfair. From his cutscene alone, we can just tell he's different from anything we've encountered before, with how full of himself he is, and his size is definitely intimidating. And after that's done, he charges at you like fucking Bane. You may see me shooting him here with a gun arm, and whilst we struggle against Victor, I'm gonna talk about the Legion arms. This is one of the final pieces of combat that differentiates it from the Soulsborne series, and it's quite a fun one depending on the circumstances. You may have seen me use some of these in the footage, but I tend to only stick to the same three. The puppet string, a sort of grapple hook, the shield, pretty self-explanatory, and the gun you just saw. There are interesting arms to switch between, but I just wish they were expanded upon further, as they're not all that powerful. They do all have their time to shine, but some are way more versatile than others, such as the shield and puppet string. This can actually be said for a lot of the game. Not every item is all that useful, but I don't necessarily have that much to complain about the ones that just aren't that good. I just don't use them, and that's fine. Whether that's the Legion arms or tools in our belt, if it's not that interesting or good to use, I just won't use it. You might have more fun with those items than I do. I wouldn't call any of them bad or poorly designed. Stepping back into the ring with Victor, it's important not to underestimate his speed, because for some reason every boss in this game is as big as the Juggernaut and as fast as the Flash. Victor is extremely hard to parry, so I prefer to just dodge him, and I find it a lot easier than nailing the parry times. After doing enough damage, he'll get charged up by the venom and become even deadlier. As you can see, he did a lot of damage to my summon. I love this fight, and Victor himself is probably my favourite character design in the game, with both phases of him looking threatening. Victor is S tier all the way. After beating him, we finally get the reveal of who that man was from earlier, and it's Simon Manus, head of the Alchemists, and he wants to play God. I think now's a good time to talk about the story. Let's go back to before all this horrible stuff started, a much simpler time in Krat. Something called Ergo gets discovered, and it's powerful, extremely powerful. The alchemists begin using it for daily use and influencing the events that happen in Krat, essentially controlling everything from the shadows. One day, a great inventor named Geppetto decides to see what happens if Ergo gets put inside puppets, and what do you know, it gives life to them. But not free will. Geppetto is the one who controls them and puts them to work with the help of the Bruce Wayne of this universe, Vanini, and I actually mean it, he has the same backstory as Bruce Wayne, you'll see what I mean later. Together, they pump out puppets like there's no tomorrow, and the puppets get to work in Krat, to the point they want to hold an exposition to show them off to the whole world. However, before that can happen, the puppet frenzy happens, turning the puppets crazy and causing them to kill everyone. It is also discovered that Ergo might not have been the best thing to be using because, like asbestos, it has some deadly side effects. It caused the petrification disease, and the alchemists tried to cover this up by doing experiments, which explains the monsters we meet. Simon also discovers that harvesting Ergo may or may not make him be able to become a god, because Ergo is very powerful. I don't really understand everything that's going on because the story is quite vague, but it's a lot easier to understand than anything happening in Dark Souls. It's laid out clearer, and the character's journey is actually pretty interesting. We have a character arc, and we are the ones who choose what that arc looks like. Lying is a core mechanic of the game, really makes you feel like Pinocchio, and it's the first game I've ever played where hiding the truth is encouraged. This is an extremely miserable world, and not telling people everything is sometimes the right choice, and funny enough, it also makes us more human. Yep, that's right, you can actually become a real boy by spreading misinformation like we're on an Instagram comment section. A great detail of us gaining more humanity is how the cat in the hotel reacts to us. At first, when you're a puppet, they'll hiss, but as we tell more lies and become more human, they warm up to us. The side quests are the main things that explore this idea of lying, and they are a lot of fun and a great way to find out more about Krat. Julian the Gent is the man who married a puppet. Before we even meet him, we find a newspaper clipping of this where people call him crazy. But Julian believes his wife is truly in love with him. As we know, Ergo does give things life, and like we see with our character, eventually free will. There is a great story to uncover here about love and the idea of it all in just a 5-minute fetch quest. A quest right at the beginning of the game is a lot darker though, with this woman believing a puppet to be her actual child that died, and we have the option on what to tell her. Wait, shit, this is foreshadowing again, I only just noticed that now. Curse you, game. We can either tell her that it's a puppet and she won't believe us, or tell her it's her kid. It's a dark world where we can either encourage this woman's delusions to make her happy, or tell her the truth and get shunned by her. Aladoro's whole quest revolves around us finding out how he deceived us and was lying the whole time. He's a great reflection of us because in a way, he's lying to protect himself the same as we have done, so if we choose to kill him, we would essentially just be a hypocrite. Even a version of Patches makes his way into this game, the bastard that he is. But my absolute favourite quest is... Oh god, shit, I'm sorry, I gotta take this, I'll be right back. I've been avoiding someone this entire video. Someone special. I'm also avoiding talking about the last 3 areas we have to go through before the final chapter because they're not that interesting. I'll quickly bring up the Puppet Swamp because that's cool. It's like Blight Town for the puppets and has an interesting boss fight with the green monster, so that's going in C. I also had a fight with this mini boss where he was getting hit by the projectiles, so that's really good game design and added another layer to the fight. Chapter 9 literally takes us back to the beginning of the game with a reskin on and not anything that special to comment about, with a reskin boss too to go along with it. That's going in D, it sucks. Chapter 10 is very short but also makes us fight the rabbits again, so that's not good. They can go next to the first time we fight them. Then we take a submarine to an island and wait, is this a Moby Dick reference? I'll talk about the island in due time, but for now, we gotta find someone. Through the game, we may encounter a phone ringing off in the distance, where we'll be greeted by the King of Riddles. He does as his name suggests and asks us questions, which we get a choice of 2 to answer from. Getting it right will be rewarded with a Trinity key, which can be used in certain rooms to give us special rewards. Every riddle the King asks also hints at something deeper about our humanity, and the difference between puppets and humans, and how there isn't much of one. The idea of cutting free from the strings that hold us and being ultimately free to do as we please, that's what the King of Riddles wants, choice and fulfillment. He's also insane. When we finally meet him in person, he's broken. His outside represents his inside. He talks to us about how puppets and humans are the same, how the ergo that's given the puppet's life is no different to the souls of a human. He makes a good point about it all, but his fault comes from how he views the world. His sense of choice is twisted and wants to inflict harm on people he doesn't like. The reason he hates humans and the alchemists so much is because they play God, and he can't stand that. He also just likes to kill people to express himself. He doesn't see anything wrong with total free will. He is a complete psychopath. 2 people he killed were Vanini's parents, but he even admits that though they technically enslaved the first batch of puppets without knowing, he didn't want to kill them because of that. He didn't care that much about it.
I didn't go there to take revenge for what his parents did. I mainly just wanted to slaughter them because they were so damned happy.
He's just an insane person with an ideology that only he understands and doesn't kill Vanini because he had a choice and wanted to see what would happen when he grew up. He killed his parents in an alley after they watched their favourite movie because he thought it would be fun leaving Vanini to grow up as an orphan. I did tell you it was like Bruce Wayne. The King views this as his magnum opus of all the things he's accomplished, but he's mistaken about what would happen to Vanini. Vanini is stronger than the King thought and used his pain to help people. In fact, he's one of the best NPCs in the game. The King proved his point about free will, but Vanini used his to help people instead of hurting them. The King is a twisted character that is probably the best in the game for what he represents, and it's fitting that we get a choice if we want to kill him or not. Alright, let's finish the game now. Making our way to the island, we're met with the spirit of Sophia. She has been our firekeeper, our maiden throughout the game, and she is an important character to say the least. It is revealed here that she is the one who sent us on this quest. She can control Ergo and use it to her advantage. Geppetto may have created us, but she is the one who arranged this whole mission to stop Simon from gaining ultimate power. Simon did gain full control in an alternate timeline, but Sophia manipulated the Ergo, reversing this Days of Future Past style, sending us back to try and stop him again. This works for every time we die also. We're not just respawning like a game would normally have us do, we're being sent back in time so we never died in the first place. It's a super interesting idea, especially for explaining how death works. The Souls games also have a reason for death, and Lies of P is the only Souls-like I've seen that gives a reason like From Software do. The game doesn't need to go this detailed for its reasoning, but it does anyway, and it ties that reasoning into the main story. Even more so when you realize how we've been used like a puppet on this mission. Whether we wanted to kill Simon or not, the game is manipulating us to go on this journey. Maybe I'm just being pedantic, but I think this was all intentional. I think the game itself is using us and telling us there is no free will, even if we think there is. It's almost like Bioshock in that sense. We get choices to pick from, but ultimately, it's all scripted. There is only the illusion of free will, as you're forced to go on the main quest in order to continue. The only free will we have is if you turn the game off and never return to it, but that's not really the point, because again, like Bioshock, by the end, the choices we've made have mattered. The final area is a gauntlet to fight through, and there's not that many moments of choice. We just battle our way to the top, facing a lot of powerful enemies, and before we can make one of the most important choices in the game, we have to face our toughest challenge yet. Alexia, you bitch. This was the boss I spent the most time on, even with the summon. How I wish I knew you could parry those lightning bolts my first time round. This is the tough but fair challenge most boss fights wish they could have, because while she kicked my ass, and the summons, I still knew she wasn't impossible. I just had to play better and smarter. She does have some bullshit attacks though, but there's simple ways to get around them, like hoping she aims for the summon instead. Her appearance is just pure badass, and when that second phase starts, you know you're in trouble. It seems only fair to put her in S tier, by far the most well done fight in the game. Now the player gets a choice, probably the most important choice in the game. We meet Sophia, the real Sophia. We can either keep her alive, forcing her to control the ergo so the world goes round, or give her peace and absorb all the power ourselves. There's only one good choice here. Sophia has been kind to us, and whilst yes, she did essentially use us, she did it for the betterment of mankind. I have done both outcomes to this, and I can tell you giving her peace and getting the cool white hair is the better outcome, and it leads to the good ending if you do so. Forcing her to live and the bad ending isn't a nice one, but I will talk about both soon. Now we have to kill God, and I think it's actually quite an underrated fight. Simon is a twisted monster man now, and is very powerful, but he hasn't transcended his humanity just yet. That's in phase 2. The imagery alone here is enough to make me love this fight, but the battle itself is also a great one. It's not that difficult, though I don't think it's meant to be. It's just meant to show how we're stronger than God now, and it makes us feel heroic after we beat him. B tier. After Simon is dead, the world is saved. That's it. We stop the evil man from creating a world in his image. He wanted there to be only truth and no lies, but a world without free will is not a very good one, even if the reasoning behind it may seem noble. Eliminating the choice of a lie could be a dangerous one, as we've seen throughout the game. A lot of the lies are to help those around us. Yes, lying can be used to deceive and trick people, but it can also be used to make them feel safer, to make them happier even. It's such an interesting concept that the game explores, and I think it does it perfectly. And that is reinforced in the final moments of the game. Making our way to the final area, we see Geppetto, and by this point we've learnt that he was responsible for the puppet frenzy. He wanted us to go on this quest, and he set it all up. He's the one who played everyone, all so he could be reunited with his real son. He asks us for our hearts so he can use the ergo machine that Simon was using and make us a real boy. It's quite sad that Geppetto doesn't want power, he doesn't want total control. He just wants to see his son again, but his methods of getting there are a by any means necessary kind of ordeal. His motivation to see his son is what sets everything in motion, and ironically, he ends up trying to control the person he cared about the most. If we comply and give him our heart, it's still our choice, but the outcome is horrendous. We essentially die, and Geppetto gets off scot-free for every crime he committed, and even kills all our friends in the process, covering his tracks. This is the bad ending, and I think it does a good job at showing us how fucked up the circumstances of our life really are. If we refuse to give him our heart, Geppetto will try to take it from us. He makes us fight the skeleton of the puppet he was going to replace us with, and fittingly, this skeleton is named Nameless Puppet. It's nothing at the moment but under Geppetto's control. No free will, only its master's commands, and it's a direct contrast to what we are, free from Geppetto's control. And this fight, whilst not being the hardest, holds all the weight of the game on its shoulders. Its second phase has the puppet go more frantic, and Geppetto's narration really sells this whole fight. It's hard to pay attention to it in the moment, but looking back at the footage you can really feel his love for his son, and his disappointment in him breaking free shines through the dialogue. And after we beat Nameless, the puppet is about to strike us in the heart. But Geppetto sacrifices himself at this moment. Perhaps it's just to protect the heart, but why just kill himself if he knows he can't see his son again? No, I think in this moment, Geppetto realizes that Carlo has truly become something more than a puppet. In his dying breath, he apologizes, calling Carlo his son, like he has always done, but this time, I think he truly believes it. What is humanity? Does it matter if we're not born a human, if we're able to make the same choices that benefit those around us? If we're able to experience every single emotion, if we're able to feel? That is what Geppetto realizes in his last moments. He realizes that Carlo has become a real boy. And we do too. The player's final choice comes from what to do with Carlo's heart. But if you free him from Geppetto, Carlo frees himself from the player. All this time, we have been controlling him. We have been pulling the strings. We choose for him. We choose what weapons he uses. We choose what dialogue he says. We choose everything for him. But now, after we make one final choice, Carlo gets to choose what happens next. And in the end, he sacrifices his life so that someone else can live a better one. That is his final choice, to give someone else free will. Lies of P is more than just a Souls-like. It's a game with a captivating story like no other, expanding on a formula that players love, and I can't wait to see what they do with the sequel. There's a lot more I could go into, like I didn't talk much about the Fox and Cat Stalker characters, who have a whole story and arc that's incredibly interesting. I didn't talk about the vessel side quests and how we can find helpful treasure doing so, and how the last vessel is complete bullshit. Unless you picked up a specific item you only get once per playthrough, and if you choose the other options you can softlock yourself out of the quest. Hell, there's loads more I could go into, but I don't think I need to. I've said all I want to say about this game that's clearly meant a lot to me, and I hope in some way you can agree with at least one thing I've said. The Soulsborne games are ones I hold very close to my heart, and playing Souls-likes are the closest I'll get to reliving some of my favourite memories playing FromSoft games for the first time. Lies of P gave me a completely new feeling. It's incredibly hard to get games noticed these days, so using mechanics like other games is understandable, but the fact that Lies of P is willing to go beyond these base influences is astonishing. The fact that it's willing to tell a story that has a message is brilliant. When I booted it up for the first time, I did not expect to be hit with a story about free will. I did not expect to get as attached to the characters as I did. I did not expect that I would get as invested in the world as I did. I just thought it would be another Soulsborne clone in a world filled with Soulsborne clones. Lies of P's main theme of control and free will made me question what I was doing in my real life, and how much choice really does matter. It made me question the idea of lying, and again how sometimes it's done to protect us from the horrible truths out there. Lying to make someone feel better because the truth would just hurt too much. Is there free will in our lives, or is it all predetermined? Do we really have a choice, or just think we do? Lies of P threw me into an existential nightmare that only the bravest games dare to do. And maybe it did the same for you. Maybe that was its intention all along. And if it was, then this game played us like a puppet. And I am more than happy that it did so. Hello, thank you for watching. It got a bit dramatic at the end, didn't it? But I'm all for the drama. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. It would really help a lot, and it is your choice. I'm thinking of doing more essays like this because it was a lot of fun, so look forward to seeing them. I'll link all the videos that influenced this critique down below. Those videos really helped me structure this one, and if you like this one, then you'll definitely love those videos. Once again, thank you, and see you later.